Welcome to the show, Leo Gerard, the president of the United Steelworkers, USW.org. Leo, hey, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Just super, and great to have you with us. I got this press release. I had to get you on because I got this press release about what the United Steelworkers is doing with Mondragon. We had a representative from Mondragon on the program last week, and I will be next week or the week after in Spain at their facilities. And for a chapter for a book I'm writing, and also for this show. And I wanted to find out, well, first of all, give you an opportunity to tell our listeners, from your point of view, what they are, what they're all about, and why this is an interesting, marriage? The wrong word, perhaps, but whatever, affiliation with the USW.
Interesting adventure.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, look, let me just say, I grew up in Canada, and I grew up in a small northern Ontario mining town where we actually had cooperatives, and we had food co-ops, and we had housing co-ops and things like that. And then I went to work in Toronto, and we had housing co-ops. And while I was working in Toronto quite some time ago, I started hearing about the Mondragon. And through work that we've done internationally, we struck up a relationship with folks who were advisors to the Mondragon and were doing work with us. And we decided that we'd explore a strategic alliance. And the reason we want to do that is, as certainly you know, Thom, and maybe some of the listeners know, the Mondragon is one of the most successful worker cooperatives in the world. And they have over 100,000 workers in their cooperative. 50% of it is manufacturing, and the rest is divided between retail and finance.
Yeah, this is a $5 or $6 billion corporation, or not corporation, institution now.
Institution, and they have their own network and their own university, and very much local content, and very successful.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, after the economic collapse brought on by the greed and corruption on Wall Street, our union has been experimenting, looking for other models. And so what we've done with the Mondragon is have an ongoing dialogue and sign a strategic alliance of how we could explore facilities in North America that we could go into together, and we would marry the cooperative movement with the collective bargaining movement. And it would look at, if we're successful, another model of economic development.
Yeah, and an alternative to laissez-faire predatory capitalism. Leo Gerard, United Steelworkers, USW.org. This reminds me in many ways of the, I don't want to say poorly done, but they were lacking a good, clean model. The many local communities and workers in numerous countries in South and Central America over the last 20 years, particularly back during some of the more repressive regimes and some of the biggest collapses in Argentina, in Ecuador, in Colombia, in Venezuela, where workers, factories were shut down and workers said, no, we're not going to leave, and we're going to continue making things here, and we'll just take this thing over from the employers. In some cases, they were successful. In some cases, worker leaders were actually murdered. In some cases, other things happened. But this seems like a way to bring about that kind of a change, to bring back some of these factories that you see. If you take Amtrak from New York to Boston and just see these thousands of empty factories along the way that used to feed the rail lines, and because back when we used to make things in America, a way to do that.
Absolutely, and some of the key structural things is that each facility is organized democratically.
Yep.
There's one person, one vote on the decision making, and the pay structure is compressed so that there's anywhere between 3.5 and 4.5 times the pay from the top decision maker to the newest worker.
Right.
Not 300 or 400, not the greed and corruption. And they look at economic development and economic social development. So when they're distributing the wealth that they've created, they not only distribute to themselves, but they distribute for the future well-being of the enterprise and to the community in which the enterprise exists, because they understand that the enterprise is an integral part of workers' lives and the community life that's netted together. So we find that pretty interesting, and as I say, growing up, I was pretty aware of food cooperatives and how those worked, and they were fascinating. And so our board unanimously voted to do this alliance, and the folks from Mondragon came and met with us, and we did some negotiations of the document, and I think it's an exciting experiment.
I have long suggested that the primary meme, the primary thought virus that unions should be using is not so much, hey, we're a union, as we are democracy in the workplace. It's called a union. And
I agree.
And Mondragon is democracy in the workplace. It's a democratic institution, whereas typically a corporation is a kingdom with lords, with a king and lords and nobles and serfs, basically. Yeah. And so I'm curious how an institution which is set up as a democracy from the ground up could also have a union within it. How's this going to work?
In our union, it's a natural fit because our union is ruled by one person, one vote.
Right, it's a democracy.
We don't vote at convention. If we're electing our local leaders at a specific time every 4 years, every 3 years, they have their election all through the same time period. I just got reelected president of the International Union. That's one person, one vote. So that marries itself to the Mondragon value system. Mm-hmm. But I think, Thom, you're absolutely right and I think the opposition to unions try to characterize it as a dictatorship because they know if we're successful in telling workers that this is really an extension of real democracy, we'll be much more successful. So that's an ongoing fight we have in the public arena. And doing our strategic alliance with the Mondragon strengthens the argument that trade unions are really institutions that are fundamental to democracy because they're fundamentally democratic.
That's right. They are democracies in the workplace. And this is one of the reasons their opponents like to talk about union bosses as if they were hierarchies when in fact they're not. The union bosses, of course, are elected, as were you. Leo Gerard, he's the head of the United Steelworkers Union, usw.org. Get over there, check it out. Leo, thanks so much for being such an outspoken advocate for American workers.
Thank you, Thom, and keep up the great work. I'm a fan. I listen to you on Air America while I'm traveling.
Thank you, sir.